Hi, and welcome everyone to Whole Soul School and Foundation's second Fireside Chats for July 2019. My name is Marie Mohler, and I am an author, intuitive, and co-founder of Whole Soul School and Foundation. I'm here with my co-host and co-founder, Lacy Frazer, who is a clinical psychologist by training and a practicing life and leadership coach and consultant today. We welcome our listeners joining us for our second edition of Fireside Chats for July 2019, continuing our conversations about the journey of personal transformation and accepting 100% responsibility for creating our reality. In this episode, we are going to be discussing the film 1,000 Words, starring Eddie Murphy, in this fairly mainstream film about the power of our words and the invitation to be more conscious about how we speak to ourselves and others in the world around us. Going back to Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements, that we have referenced a number of times in this month's posts and podcasts, in order to transform our lives, to become 100% responsible for creating our reality, and to ultimately free ourselves from ourselves, we must become aware of the power of our words to liberate ourselves to live a life of our dreams, or to further entrap us on the same loops or patterns of thinking and living and believing that we have lived in for most of our lives. The choice will be ours to step into this new level of awareness or not. But Eddie Murphy in 1,000 Words does a great job of illustrating these concepts for all of us. And so without further ado, I welcome you, Lacy, to this powerful conversation today, and I welcome all of our listeners.
Thank you, Marie. It's wonderful to be here and to talk about another wonderful movie that helps us illustrate our themes and our points and the wisdom that we discuss every month at Whole Soul. So just as a reminder for our listeners, and as you've already stated, the month of July has been devoted to this concept of accepting 100% responsibility for creating our reality. And one of the specific aspects of this topic that we really have woven throughout the blogs and the earlier Fireside Chat and my transformation talk with David Morgenstern is the power of the spoken word. And you know, we kind of approach the power of words in two different ways. On the one hand, you know, we have talked about the fact that words have energy, and they can have positive energy and they can have negative energy. And so when we use our words collectively as we speak to other people, it's a collective energy that we're putting out there. And we've talked a lot about energy over the last several months, so I won't reiterate all of that. Of course, it's my favorite topic, but I will just say that we are electrical magnetic beings, and our words have energy, and that energy goes out and pulls into our experience that which is like itself. And so it's very clear that the spoken word has a lot of power, can have a lot of power in our life. And we talk a lot about Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the book, The Four Agreements. And why it's so important is because his first agreement is be impeccable with your word. And he's really talking about integrity and truth and being truthful with what we say and what we mean. There's one quote I'd like to open up with from that book. And he says, "The word is a force. It is the power you have to express and communicate, to think, and thereby to create the events in your life." So, you know, the key here is that we must be intentional with the words we use and how we communicate with other people.
It's one of the most powerful tools we have to create our reality. So when we consciously choose our words, and I know we're going to be talking about this related to this particular film, but again, when we consciously choose our words, we're writing into the script of our own lives what we're going to experience. If filmmakers write a film script, right, and authors write books, they use words.
Right.
They use words to convey those ideas, those insights, the plot, all of those things. And we are literally doing the same thing with our words.
Absolutely. And it's, when we realize that, and remember, we're weaving this in the concept of 100% responsibility. So we've got to always remember that we are responsible for the words that are coming out of our mouth, with the energy of the words that are coming out of our mouth, and how we are communicating with other people.
Right.
So we chose this movie, 1,000 Words. It was not a big box office smash. And in fact, I think it was kind of panned by the critics. But like with many of the movies we talk about, they may not be the most popular Oscar-winning films, but they often have tremendously deeper meaning that kind of the mainstream either dismisses or they just don't pick up on. And I think this is one of those films. And I think it does an amazing...
But for the seeker, we can recognize that there's amazing nuggets in there for us.
Yes.
And I feel that many times when I'm watching any kind of show, if the authors of those shows or movies or films were enlightened in any way, they do embed these hidden messages and these meaningful messages for seekers and people looking for them.
Yeah.
And so this is another film that some of our listeners might have already watched once or maybe never heard of, but if they have, they might have missed that there was some deep meaning in there. And as we rewatched it to get ready for our podcast, I was amazed at how much we were able to pull out of the film, in this viewing when we were watching it super consciously, that there were a ton of messages in there about this.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do when I was working with the men in prison, often I would show a film every Friday, and I often would present the film and say, "Has anyone seen this?" And 8 out of 15 hands would go up and say, "Oh yeah, I've seen that film. I've seen that." And I said, "Well, I want you to see it now through new eyes. I want you to see it now through the lens of spiritual awakening or the hero's journey or the, all that we had been doing in group." And that when they watched it this second or third time through this new lens, they were just...
It was an entirely different movie.
An entirely different movie. That's what they would say is, "I've never seen that movie in this way." I mean, it almost feels like they hadn't seen it.
Right.
Because it was an entirely different experience. And I loved that. And this was definitely one of those movies because you see it the first time, and if you're not awake to the deeper meaning,
you're just spending 90 minutes with a film that's entertaining.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So let's just review the plot quickly, and then we'll get into some of the deeper messages. But so this movie is about a young literary agent by the name of Jack McCall, played by Eddie Murphy, who basically sort of has the gift of gab. He is very inauthentic in how he speaks to people. He can talk anybody into anything. And throughout the film, we sort of see a very selfish, egocentric, disconnected character who uses his words to get whatever he wants.
To manipulate, essentially.
Well, he prides himself on his ability to kind of talk anyone into doing anything.
Yes. So, and in this film, we see Jack McCall lie and use words exactly to manipulate, to coerce, and to serve himself through the first half of the film.
Yeah.
So, they really do a good job of establishing who he was before the catalyzing event.
Yes, he very, very egocentric and selfish and disconnected and all the things we've said. And they do a really good job showing this and illustrating this in the film, whether he's, I remember he was in a Starbucks coffee shop and he doesn't want to wait in the long line. So he pretends his wife's in labor and they're going to let him up to the front of the line. And, so throughout the first part of the movie, we really see him kind of be a jerk. I mean, he dismisses everybody. He's not listening. He's not paying attention to what's going on around him. No
kindness or appreciation or patience or thought of anyone else but himself.
Right.
Purely himself.
Right. And so he challenges himself at one point to get there is a new age guru who shows up, who's written a book and who no one has been able to sign to publish his book. So he challenges himself to get this guy to sign with his company, of course, by lying and manipulating. And eventually, the guru clearly sees through his deceit, but he agrees to the deal. And that night, after the deal is made, Jack goes back to his house, and magically in his backyard there appears a Bodhi tree, a magic tree. And what he discovers eventually is that for every word that he speaks, a leaf falls off the tree. And when the tree eventually runs out of leaves, the tree will die, and Jack learns that he will die as well. So he is intimately connected to this tree, and that with every word spoken, a leaf falls until the last leaf falls, and he will die.
Well, and I want to add to that, Lacy, and he's also tied to this guru, right? So somebody he was just looking to coerce into the deal, right? To have another success mark or hash mark in his list of achievements for himself. He ends up needing this guru to help him understand what's going on with this tree in this backyard that becomes a reflection and a mirror of him, right?
Yes.
So, but interestingly, at that part of the film, he's just seeking to manipulate this guy to get the deal. But he ends up tying himself to this guru and needing his support to go on the journey he's about to take.
Right.
So, and I was going to say, Lacy, with Jack forced to pick and choose his words, because every leaf on the tree is a word, right?
Right.
Communicating with others becomes difficult and full of misunderstandings. These misunderstandings cost him 2 book deals, his job, and his wife, Caroline, played by Kerry Washington.
Yes, and so we really see his life kind of systematically fall apart because of the fact that he is not communicating well. He can't communicate. He's kind of tied up by the notion that he's connected to this tree. So with his life falling apart and the tree running out of leaves and his impending mortality, Jack confronts the guru and asks how he can end this, what seems like a curse. He's trapped. And the guru basically tells him, Jack, you need to make peace in all of your relationships, right?
Right, with his wife, his mother, his son, right?
He's got to really decide where those unresolved relationships lie.
Right.
And then the guru says you need to find truth within yourself, and you need to quiet your mind, not just your mouth. In that quiet, you will hear the truth. So, we're really, this movie really sets up the concept that words have power and silence has power.
Right.
And that's something
in the silence, there's truth.
In the silence, there's truth. And it was so clear he was living his life from such a false place.
Exactly.
There was no truth there anywhere.
And there wasn't much meaning either.
Right.
But he's like a lot of people in our lives, when we're not aware of these things, we're just doing life. Life is doing us, instead of us creating life and us enjoying those creations.
Right.
He was caught up in the rat race of all that our culture tells us is important. And he had his own, of course, unique interpretation of how life should be. And he was living that. So to tie the title, of course, is that at a certain point when he realizes that this tree is directly tied to him and what he's saying, at that point of realization, it looks like he has about 1,000 words left, basically 1,000 leaves left on the tree. And he has to figure out how to either choose them wisely or suffer the consequences of not choosing them so wisely.
Right.
So it's pretty profound. It's a great concept.
It is a great concept. And, I just want to go back to this concept of that words are powerful when spoken and words are powerful when not spoken. Okay. Right. So, we think about it. When do we use our words the most? We use our words to tell our stories, right? Words create drama. Mm-hmm. We use words to cover up what we may be really feeling, to mask our own emotional pain, right?
Yeah.
And we use words to gossip. Don Miguel Ruiz talks about this a lot. I won't get into it now, but gossip is a place where we use a lot of just useless words,
right,
for all the wrong reasons.
right.
You know, we use words to create and perpetuate more drama, to control and manipulate others. Words are very, very powerful. So by being connected to the tree and knowing that with every word a leaf is going to drop, and that when they're all gone, he's going to die. You know, Jack is faced with dying or facing an awakening to new insights about himself. And that's really the most profound thing, you know, and this is a little bit of a hero's journey in this movie. He's really...
He does.
He is. He's living a very sort of egoic, false life. He doesn't realize that all of his talk and all of his chatter and all of his bravado is covering up a lot of emotional pain. We see that when we learn that his father abandoned the family, that his mother has dementia, that, you know, there was a lot of underlying things going on that's revealed.
Unresolved energy.
Unresolved throughout the movie.
Yeah. And it took a tree, this sort of magical hero's journey tree, showing up
Right.
in his life, as I think the movie Finding Joe would call the initiation. The initiation from that film,
Right.
Finding Joe, Lacy, would
Right.
be the tree showing up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And holding him accountable.
Right.
And making him be accountable to himself for his words and how he's showing up in his life. And it was, of course, when he gets quiet that he has to, you know, experience the pain of a lot of unresolved things in his life that he was trying to fill up with all those book deals, right?
Yes.
And all those words,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And, you know, he really spends 3/4 of the movie and he wastes 3/4 of the tree on a lot of words until he starts to realize, until he really starts to understand the kind of dire nature of the situation he's in.
Yeah.
And
I think he was even still trying to manipulate the tree.
yeah, oh, absolutely.
I mean, if he can manipulate people,
Right.
and coerce all kinds of people to do his bidding or whatever he really wanted,
Right.
he had plans for that tree.
Right.
And he tries to do all kinds of things to that tree, including cut it down.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Right? Or, you know, just to get rid of it. But none of those things work because that wasn't his path.
Right. And so he really, there's a point where at some point he realizes, okay, I really can't speak because if I speak, the leaves are going to fall. Now he hasn't really internalized the larger messages that he needs to gain from this experience yet, but he does realize he can't speak. And so now he is silenced, right?
Right.
And it's in the silence and in the experience of being silent that he starts to, so many different things happen. But perhaps some of the more pronounced things are, you know, when he's quiet, he starts to actually listen to other people because
Right.
he's forced to.
Right.
Right? He realizes that other people have value, that other people have feelings, that other people have a way of expressing themselves that he's never paid attention to before.
Right.
Because before he was barreling over everybody.
He would just fill the space with words
Exactly.
completely.
So that when he wasn't controlling the conversation anymore and speaking over them, you know. So he really noticed, or at least me as the viewer noticed, how in the silence he was able to start to connect with other people, start to connect with their feelings, start to understand people a little bit better.
And I don't know if you were going to talk about this, Lacy, but you know, there's a part in the story, the one person he does seem to really care about how she feels about him is his relationship with his mother. And so whenever he has an accomplishment, it seems like the first place he wants to go is to see his mother, who does have dementia in the film. But when he goes to see her and be himself, Jack McCall, right?
Possibly the only time he's truly himself. Like he is her son.
Right.
Right?
That is one of the few times where he does show up to be her son and to be who and what he is and was.
Authentically
At some level, anyway, is with his mother. But interesting when she's, when she sees him, she doesn't see him. She sees his father. And so when he is in this place of, I wouldn't call it authenticity at that point. He wants to be seen. He can't be heard by his mother.
Yeah.
Because she only sees what she sees. And so there's something very humbling in those interactions early on in the film that she's just not seeing him or hearing him.
Right.
So interestingly that he goes on to become that person who doesn't see and doesn't hear others.
Right.
When it seems like that was a big part of his childhood.
Yes, and I think we do talk about it a little bit later. We'll bring that up, just this relationship with his father, because a big part of what he had to end up coming to
terms with
was his relationship with his father.
Yeah.
But the second point I wanted to make just about the concept of what he learned in the silence was, this was kind of funny, but tongue-in-cheek, but also sad in some ways to watch, was he really learned how others viewed him, because when he couldn't speak, he often had to ask others to speak for him. And there's one scene where he has his assistant, he's in a restaurant and they're trying to close a big deal and he can't speak, and he has his assistant speak for him. And he basically communicates to the assistant, look, just be me. Just be me.
What a directive.
Yeah.
Right?
Just be me.
Yeah.
And so the assistant, just butchers this conversation with these people because he's pretending to be Jack and use Jack's language and Jack's mannerisms and treat these people like Jack would. And Jack, who can't say anything, is having to witness that.
Right, to watch him be him.
Right. So basically sort of to see himself in a mirror.
Yeah.
And he gained, I think, a lot of self-awareness by witnessing that. So in his silence, he learned about himself as he watched other people try to communicate on his behalf, in the way he would. And that was really... He had to experience
their perception of him when he couldn't respond.
Yes.
And so he wasn't in a place that he had enough words that he could sacrifice to argue back. Right? He just had to begin to listen. Over time. Yeah, it's very humbling to see you through another person's eyes. For clearly this character, he had to see that.
Yeah, and I just as I sit here and I sort of feel that scene and I feel this film overall, I just think about the power of silence and how often I have barreled through conversations or stepped on people or had my own agenda and pushed through something and didn't listen. Just didn't listen, and I'm guilty of that with my kids and, in a lot of aspects of my life. And I think it has always been so profound for me to get quiet. It's not really in my personality, to be honest. But when I do it, I can't tell you the power it has when I get quiet and I actually listen, because I'm not just listening for the words, but I'm also feeling the energy and I'm feeling what the silence is teaching me, so I just want to interject a little bit about that, because I really, I connect at some level with this character and with Jack and this false self that he had created and all of his gibbering and jabbering to manipulate and get what he wants. And then to come to a place of humility after such a long battle with himself, was really important and really profound.
And the meaning or the richness of life starts to touch your heart and touch your soul. Which he just didn't have room for that before.
No.
We don't. Many of us don't have room for that kind of connection with others when we're so busy, whatever it is, with our own goals or our own agendas. When we miss the opportunity to exchange with somebody in a way where we really see each other, it's a big loss in a lot of our lives. And so you do in this film in particular, you certainly see that experience in him where he, at a certain point, is humbled by that there's no manipulating this tree. There's no going around it. It's kind of besting him. It's kind of,
Yeah.
it is winning in the sense that it's not yielding to all of his tricks and all the things that used to work.
Right.
And as we reference many of our previous conversations here on this podcast, Lacy, we have a lot of ego defenses. We have a lot of armor. We have a lot of skills that we can pull out of our old toolbox to take care of this problem. Right? But when he throws every last thing he's got at this tree and it's not working, he is forced to listen. And there is something that as he starts to witness other people mirror who he is back to him by them acting his behavior out or trying to engage his old ways to get him to talk or whatever these things are, it is very humbling in that silence or in the quieter experience of that exchange with another person to really feel what we're missing in many of our conversations when we aren't fully present, when we aren't engaging the silence or allowing other people that time and respect to express themselves, right? There's value in all of us. And sometimes we just don't make that time, and it's not a priority, and it's not always valued in our culture. Success in business, in the larger culture that we all live in, it's a global culture. It's kind of pushing your way through, and he definitely does that. So it's really profound to see that start to take that shift. And of course, like any good movie does, if you can see yourself as any part of this character, you can have a great deal of compassion for him, because we all get caught up in the cultural way of being in this world, fast-paced, driven, competitive, not listening, not always honoring ourselves or others, right? And the way that somewhere deep in our soul we know is right to do. But, we get in patterns and we get in habits, and we become those patterns and we become those habits. And he clearly was that person at the beginning of the movie, but as it starts to shift and he really has to accept that he has to go on this journey inside himself at some level, it's really humbling for all of us to feel like we could, a version of us is Jack McCall. There's something about this character that I think we can all relate to at some level. Either we've experienced a Jack McCall or we've been a Jack McCall, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a moment where you really see him surrender to his plight and surrender to the inevitability that he actually may die. And he's got, I think, probably 10 leaves left on the tree when he duct tapes his mouth and he starts to nurture the tree by watering it. And
it's for the first time.
For the first time. And he begins to have an inner dialogue. And what I think tends to happen to most people and what we're conditioned to do is we are all about the outer dialogue. Telling people what to do, telling people where to be, telling people our story, involving people in our drama, playing the victim, doing the gossiping, competing with other people, right? And this is all
just
that
running the pattern.
Running the patterns of the outer dialogue that has a purpose in some way. I mean, it's making us feel better in some way. It's a defense in some way against something that we don't want to see or feel, right? All of that chitter chatter. But at some point, as he really realizes that he really very well may die after the last 10 leaves fall, he duct tapes his mouth and he knows that because he before he duct tapes his mouth, he realizes he's got 10 words left. And that's when he is extremely judicious about what those words are going to be. And that's where the surrender really came.
Not until there's 10 words left on the tree does he fully, at some level, take responsibility for those last 10 leaves.
Exactly.
And that means if he had 1,000 words left to start, he used the other, was that my math right? 990 leaves.
Right.
Right? He uses those perhaps not in the most effective ways. So he's got to really make these last 10 count.
And in that contemplation and in that kind of judiciousness with words that he's, I think, mulling over, he begins to review his relationships, the unresolved relationships in his life, the relationship with his mother, the relationship with his wife, and most importantly, the relationship with his father, for whom he carries a tremendous amount of anger for leaving the family. And I believe he left the family and then he ended up dying, and Jack never got to resolve a relationship with his father.
Right.
So he's carried that with him his whole life. And I think that's a lot of the pain. And became him.
In many ways.
Yeah. There is reference to the fact that he became a lot like his father.
Right.
Disconnected.
Right.
Egoic. Inattentive to other people.
Yeah.
So, perhaps I think towards the end in this surrendering kind of time where he's sort of on his knees and he's praying and he's reviewing these relationships, he realizes who he has become as an adult, and he realizes he kind of settles. I think inside of himself, he finds peace in knowing what those final 10 words are going to be and to who he is going to speak them.
Yeah.
Right?
And at that point, I think those 10 leaves become his greatest teachers.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he's at a point of readiness that he just wasn't at any other point in the film. And I think, Lacy, you said the word surrender. I think there's a certain point where we accept our journey, we accept what we're going through at some level. And at some level in that surrender is accepting responsibility that this is what we're going to go through, wherever it's going to lead us, whether it's death or whether it's a new beginning in our lives in some way, or just creating a new chapter for ourselves in our lives, but the death of an old way of being, whatever that represents for people. That is part of that accepting 100% responsibility, where you finally turn and look at what you're really dealing with. He was really dealing with only 10 words left. Not just 10 words that he could say, but 10 words that he'd be alive potentially to say. And it does. It really shifts, significantly inside him. And he clearly takes the steps to go and see the last people he thinks he might be seeing with those 10 words.
Right.
He becomes very conscious about how he's using his time and his words at that point. And if each of us could just pause a moment, if you're listening to this podcast, and think about if you had 10 words, who would you choose to go say some very essential things in the most efficient use of words that you possibly could? It's an interesting question.
It is. I'm not prepared to answer that right now, but it does. It really does. It does make you think about that.
Yeah.
There's a quote that the guru says in there. He says, it's quite amazing how many thoughtless words one can speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we think about all of our conversations during the day, whether it's on the phone with customer service, whether it's in the grocery store line,
right,
whether it's with our spouse or our children,
right,
how much wasted air are we putting out there in thoughtless ways?
Yeah.
I think it's an important question to ask ourselves and to pay attention to. But you bring up, this really good points about this sort of state of being that we're calling surrender. And I do hope we'll have more of a chance to talk about that on another podcast.
Yeah.
Because it is an essential part of sort of the journey of transformation.
Yeah.
Is getting to a place where we really do surrender to whatever is to come next. And we really own the path.
Yeah.
We own our life. Right?
It's a really powerful moment in any of our lives, and some of us might have several moments. It may not just be one, but if anybody listening has been on a significant journey and can relate to some of what we're talking about, then you would know that moment when you take that turn, when that inner shift occurs, and you do accept what's unfolding in your life, and you accept that you have a choice on how you're going to show up and meet that challenge or meet that circumstance. And are you going to do it in the old way that you always showed up as? Or do you want to leave a different legacy for yourself in some way? Do you want to do you want to make a different choice in how you show up to meet that experience? And these are moments that are really life-changing for many of us. And if you haven't quite had that experience, I think there are still many other choice points that we make on a daily basis, in traffic, at the office, with our kids, with customer service on the phone. We might think we're never going to see that person again, but we can show up and be a better energy. We can have a more positive attitude. I'm just reminded of a silly example, but in the last week or two, I know that, Lacy, you and I have had to make some phone calls about some things in our house, and just, taking care of routine maintenance type stuff. But when you're on those calls and you're dealing with people and you wait on hold, and the conversation takes a while, and then they put you on hold, or the live chat situation, we've all been there. And I find that I have more patience than I ever did, before. And when I do that, and you stick out the call, and you're still positive, and you're still patient, and you haven't lost your cool with these people, even if they're telling you things you didn't want to hear about your bill or whatever they can do for you, I have found in the last week or two, I've just really noticed the number of people saying, "Thank you. You've been the most pleasant customer that I've dealt with all day." Right. And they've either given us like a $5 credit on our account just for being nice. It just shows you like how people in those roles in a customer service capacity don't always get nice people on the other end of the line who have compassion or understanding or patience and the value of their own words, right? The value of their ability to show up. And, and to choose how they show up. That's what we're really talking about, to be really responsible for how you show up and the words you choose.
Yes.
In how you show up. I mean, that is an absolute reflection. Your words and how you're speaking to people is an absolute reflection of the choice you're making in that moment to be who you are. So, and that's what he does. And that's an interesting quote that you said. It's quite amazing how many thoughtless words one can speak.
It does. It really makes you think about what's coming out of your mouth.
Yeah.
I was just thinking as you were talking about the growth of meditation and yoga in our society over the last several years. Yeah. Probably last 15 years or so. And I think, I don't know this for a fact, this is sort of me making this up, but I just wonder how much of that growth is people are starting to move into an appreciation of silence and pausing and being, right? Because that's what those disciplines teach us.
Yeah. Well, and I think the pendulum is swinging in our world today, where maybe at a certain point 10, 20, 30 years ago, as it started to get accelerated and technology and all the things that made our lives more fast-paced, right? That was kind of exciting. And I think we've fast-paced ourselves into oblivion now. And I think we have to find a way back to balance. And so I think that we are being called to find ways to instill those moments in our lives. And if meditation in a class, a meditation or a yoga class helps you get there, these are skills, these are resources that we can utilize in our culture today to come back to our true selves, to our more authentic self.
Well, and that's that's kind of a nice segue to sort of the end of the film. And, spoiler alert here, but Jack ends up, the last 3 words that he chooses before his imminent death is, "I forgive you," speaking to his father, and very, very powerful. And then a storm hits, lightning strikes, and we think Jack has died because he's sitting at his father's grave.
Right, which is the ultimate in letting go.
Right.
The forgiveness, the "I forgive you" or his last 3 leaves, right? And then also letting go of all the pain that he'd held from the lack of forgiveness.
Yes.
It seems like it's his final release, right?
Yes.
He finally lets it go. He surrenders it completely.
And he could die in peace.
And he was okay. He achieved what the guru had said, right? You need to make peace with yourself and with your relationships.
Right.
And find truth. And he did.
And of course, we know that it was true truth because he didn't die. The tree actually ends up blossoming.
As a result of the place he found inside.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exactly. As a metaphor for that. And I thought that was amazing to feel him let go, to feel him find the peace and the truth. And then he comes back and he has learned.
And find peace in trusting the process and the task that had been set before him. A lot of the masters or the gurus that many people have studied it through the centuries, right? We value or we celebrate or we honor people that seem to be, again, in the hero's journey, right, as a story for all of us to follow, kind of like Joseph Campbell's work where he's tracking the heroes through time. There is this process where the gurus or the master beings, they let go and they trust the process.
Right.
They let go to trusting the process. They surrender to that higher process. And so that is another profound moment at the end of the film when he lets go and he trusts the process. That's when everything restores itself. That's when the balance is reset. Yes. It's pretty amazing.
Yes.
And how hard we fight against that.
Yes.
When if it wasn't us going through it, maybe as an outsider of our own life, we might say, well, why wouldn't you just befriend the tree? Right? Why wouldn't you just nurture the tree and nourish what you have and enjoy what you have while you have it? But we don't seem to be wired that way. We seem to be wired to have to sort of, wrestle with the journey a little bit and learn how to let go. I think over the course of our lives, we've learned to, whatever it is, fight the cell phone company or battle our way through school or work hard to get that job. We're used to striving, but in that overly driven way. We're not really taught how to trust and gently move through life. That's just not really our culture.
Yeah.
And so, so in a way, I think that's another beautiful part of when he's having to trust the truth. He's having to trust those 10 leaves. He's having to trust the letting go process. And trusting in that process is part of being 100% responsible. I don't know that film was making the point of 100% responsibility, but it's in there in his having to be responsible for his words and even in his accepting responsibility for nourishing those last 10 leaves, those last 10 words. He does become 100% responsible and he does become impeccable with his word. Right?
Exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and I hesitate to bring this last point up because it might take us away from the depth and the warmth of the feeling that I have listening to you right now. But towards the end, somebody's referring to his almost death, and he says, that was the fake me that died, right. And that's powerful because it represents the death of his false self, right? The death of his ego.
Mm-hmm. We have to die to our inauthentic self for our true self to be born.
Yeah, I mean, we have talked so much at Whole Soul School and Foundation about the conditioned self. This false self, the self that we grow up, that we become out of the conditioning and the belief systems that we've ingested. That
will cling to and defend to the death. And that's what he seems almost on a path to do until he gets to that last part with the 10 words. Yes. But that is so true. That it was the fake, inauthentic Jack McCall that died, and that now and I don't know if you're going to say more about that, but then a true self emerged is that he's free. I mean, he just completely becomes a whole different person. He becomes like the guru. He's hugging the guru and loving everybody in his life in a way that, he never imagined himself doing before. He becomes the guru.
Well, exactly.
Of light.
And you can see him live such a different way with his words, at the tail end of his journey. He's using less words. He's showing value to other people. He's connected to other people. Right. He's living much more authentically. And so this is yet another film that shows us the sort of journey to the authentic self, the death of the false self, to living in truth.
And and he's living a very meaningful life in the chosen use of his words, in the chosen way he's showing up with integrity and authenticity with the people he loves and cares about. and what I find interesting, and I don't know if you were going to cover this, Lacy, but where, towards the end of the film, he ends up writing the story of 1,000 words. He becomes the author, right? He becomes the author of his life. Yeah. And he writes in a book, because he formerly was that agent who just was trying to manipulate to get book deals with people,
right,
to make himself more money. Right. He becomes the author of his life on the other side of that desk, on the other side of that experience. He becomes the creator of his life. He writes the story of his hero's journey. Let's tie all the films together that we've talked about at Whole Soul School and Foundation up to this point. And what also happens in that process, in that letting go, as he signs a book deal, probably for more money he would have ever made on the other side of the desk as the agent.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
He steps into prosperity.
Yes.
Right? He gets to be with his family. He writes this amazing book. He lands this amazing book deal. And he's not even concerned who's going to be the highest bidder for his book deal. Right? He completely trusts and lets go, lets his agent figure out what's going to be the best offer.
Right.
And so he's let go of all of those inauthentic materialistically driven desires, and he's prospered for it. That's so much a part of this entire journey too.
Yeah.
Is that when we let go. So, I know we're going to talk a little bit more, but what's amazing is when you watch this film, the first time when I saw it, I don't know when I saw it. I don't know when this film came out. Do you
2012.
know? 2012. So when it first came out, I watched it. I remember it illustrating some of the things that we were tapped into. But when I've journeyed a lot since 2012. It's been 7 years. So when I watched it again this time, I really thought, wow, there really are a lot of amazing, insightful gems in that story, in that film. And I'm sure if other people were just going to be entertained, it's not a typical Eddie Murphy film.
Right.
By any stretch of the imagination.
Although he starts out kind of...
in his old self.
Yes.
He kind of starts out in some of his... So it makes me wonder, I wonder if he has had some kind of transformation in his life to either want to participate in a film like this in some way.
Right.
So...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great film.
It is, and it's one to see again if in talking to our viewers, if you've seen it in the last 7 years, but you want to see it through a new lens now, watch it again and pay attention. It's pretty profound. So I don't, I think we've done a good job summarizing the film and really bringing it into our theme for the month. And I wanted to end with a Don Miguel Ruiz quote. This is a little longer, but I think, he is sort of the master of the importance of our words. Yeah. And so he says, "The word is the most powerful tool you have as a human. It is the tool of magic. But like a sword with two edges, your word can create the most beautiful dream, or your word can destroy everything around you. One edge is the misuse of the word, which creates a living hell. The other edge is the impeccability of the word, which will only create beauty, love, and heaven on earth. Depending on how it is used, the word can set you free, or it can enslave you even more than you know. All the magic you possess is based on your word. Your word is pure magic, and misuse of the word is black magic."
Wow. That's powerful.
So again, if somebody listening has not read the book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, please read that book. It is kind of a mainstay, a cornerstone, a foundational pillar of a lot of the work we do and we talk about at Whole Soul.
I've seen somebody on YouTube, I think, actually has the Four Agreements. They read it in 4 separate videos. And so if you didn't want to get the book, but you wanted to hear it, you can listen to somebody on YouTube probably read it to you. I'll see if I can find a link for that and put it in the comments section.
I actually found...
in the description section.
Online, I found a PDF version for free.
Oh.
Of the book. So
Okay,
that's
maybe we
out
can
there
include
too.
that link, too.
Yeah.
So, but yes, it's incredibly valuable work, and it creates just a greater, deeper conversation with ourselves, because that's what we're really cultivating. We're cultivating that deeper connection with ourselves and who we really are.
Yes.
And when we have tools like these to help us activate and open more to that energy inside us and that awareness and that consciousness inside us, it just makes the journey a little bit easier. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can listen to other people who have tremendous insight about some of these aspects of the journey.
Yeah.
And then we can feel supported, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, I want to say thank you, a big thank you to our listeners for joining us in an awesome conversation about the power of our words in authoring our lives today. This conversation hopefully further illustrates to our growing Whole Soul School and Foundation audience that we truly are 100% responsible for the experiences, energies, expressions, and manifestations in our lives. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast on social media. Help us spread the word about Whole Soul School and Foundation and the unique insights, teachings, and messages that we aim to use to inspire in the world. We also welcome you to visit our website at www.wholesoulschoolandfoundation.org, and please sign up to receive our newsletter and important notifications. It'll just keep you abreast of all that we're doing. And you can visit us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram to check out our reminders for the soul posts, which are inspirational messages that we post twice a week, focused on our monthly theme. And we also include poems by our mystic poet, Flower Diamond, as well as quotes from the films that we discuss. They're always just nice tune-ups for your vibration, right? Just
Absolutely.
a little something in your week to help keep you on course, to like tune your inner compass to the light and things that are working and things that are beautiful and things that are manifesting more goodness in the world.
It's really important to keep our energy focused in that direction, to get that booster shot kind of, you know. But to really focus on what helps us feel happy and kind and positive and all of those things. We just have to keep turning to it. There are going to be things that pull our attention away from it, but we can choose to keep turning to it. And we hope that the offerings at Whole Soul School and Foundation will help with that.
Yeah, they're really great doses.
Doses,
to sort of reset. You know, any one of us can have something happen in our day that just pulled us off track. And so podcasts like these and our reminders for the soul are just some offerings that can help you with that reset process inside yourself. And hopefully we'll become a voice that you look for in your day. When you know you get pulled off track, we invite you to come find us. Right? Absolutely. And other things, positive music or things that really uplift you. That's one of the ways that you can easily reset. So, and of course, I would be remiss if I didn't invite listeners to consider making a donation to Whole Soul School and Foundation. We are still in our we're in our second year here at Whole Soul School and Foundation, and every donation really helps us strengthen our pillars, strengthen our core foundation here, and the template for what we want to create, and this larger broadcasting vision and teaching vision that we really have. To bring more things into form. So thank you for all of our donors who've donated before, and we invite people to consider making a donation to support us in the future. So we really appreciate that. And we want to thank you all for holding the visions that we hold here for our collective humanity, that we all are taking these steps at some level inside us to free ourselves from our old ways of being and the old habits that just don't serve us anymore as individuals, but really as a greater collective humanity. You can see the condition of the earth. You can see the things going on in the news. We can see many things that could be troubling in some way to our spirit that knows there's another way. And sometimes we can feel helpless to make those changes. But the first step in creating a big change in the world is by, doing your own personal work, going on your own personal transformation journey, finding a way to feel better inside yourself and to bring that positive energy wherever you go.
Yes.
So we thank everyone for spending time with us each month, especially on this podcast today. And we'll be back in August for our topic of
the intersection of science and spirituality.
So those are going to be some fascinating and awesome conversations to come. And so we wish everybody a great rest of July. And we'll see you as we turn the corner into August.
Yes.
So,
Wow.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lacy.
Yep.
Blessings, and have a wonderful week.